DSP tries it.
What is up? It is DSP with another episode of DSP Tries It, and following along with the episode that I recently did covering a Sanwa joystick, this one is a Shimizu joystick, and what that means is it has the competing version of control style from Japanese controls, and this has all Shimizu joystick and also Shimizu buttons. So what I want to do primarily here is explain the difference between Sanwa and Shimizu, give a little bit of my opinion about the two, which I think is better in my opinion, and then give this joystick an overall rating itself. Excuse me. First of all, this is a stick made by Hori. It is the Real Arcade Pro EXSE, and the SE stands for Shimizu actually. Well, actually they say Special Edition, but that's bullshit. It's really supposed to be for Shimizu. And first of all, Shimizu sticks. You're going to notice right off the bat when I move this stick around, it sounds different from a Sanwa. You can usually tell a Shimizu stick from the very high-pitched clicking. It almost sounds a little bit hollow, like there's, you know, hear what I hear? It almost sounds like there's an echo inside of the stick. Shimizu sticks are two things. They are a little bit looser than a Sanwa stick, meaning it's a little bit less resistance to move this stick around. I think I described it in a Sanwa stick review. It's almost like moving this around in air. It's not that much resistance, but at the same time, it feels like there is a slightly larger distance to get this thing to go to an extreme direction. So with the Sanwa click, you're already there. Here in Shimizu, it's like, oh, now you're there. So it seems like it's a very minute difference. It's not giant, don't get me wrong, but it still does feel like there is a difference. One of the things I like about the Shimizu joystick is that it's since it is a lighter stick, there's less resistance, it's easier for that stick to revert to neutral. So if I'm going to be just standing still and all of a sudden, or if I'm walking forward and then all of a sudden someone jumps at me and I'm Ryu or Ken and I need to do a dragon punch, I release the joystick and then go down, forward, press punch, and I usually get a dragon punch because it easily reverts to neutral. With the Sanwa stick, it's a little bit harder to get it to revert to neutral if you need it to on the fly. And that's probably because it gives a little bit more resistance to the stick. But at the same time, I actually find it pretty difficult for me, and this is just for me, compared to a Sanwa stick, to do something like a command throw, a full 360, like Zangief spinning pile driver, because for me it feels like it's a greater distance to have to do that motion on this stick because it's a looser stick, and like I said, it seems like there is a little bit more distance to hit those extreme directions, so I technically have to do the motion a little bit faster on this stick than I'd have to do it on the Sanwa, and I usually fuck that up. So personally, it's all on you. What do you feel like is the better stick choice for your competition? Personally, I recommend you sit down with both because I've played on both, and I found that once you get accustomed to either stick, both of them are fine for tournament standards. If you have a certain game plan that you like to do, like for example, if I were going to play Shotos like Ryu and Ken and Akuma all the time, I might actually opt for a Shimizu stick over a Sanwa. But if I were going to pick other characters, I might opt for the Sanwa. So it all depends on your playing style. Now let's talk about the Shimizu buttons. Shimizu buttons are a little bit different than Sanwa buttons, okay? Now remember, when I said with Sanwa buttons, I said they're very, very low to the stick, very contoured to the stick, unlike American buttons that are chunky. Well, these Shimizu buttons, even though they are low to the stick, they're a little bit higher than Sanwa buttons. In fact, I'd say they're in between an American button and a Sanwa button. And I like to call these a plunger style, because as you hear, it's not a click sound you get when you press these. Remember with the Sanwa, it was click, click, click? Here you get like a plunge, plunge, plunge. It's almost like a plunger going into a cylinder. That's what it feels like when you push these buttons. And so, even though you might not get as fast as a reaction as you get from a Sanwa, in my opinion, it's really such a negligible difference. It doesn't make that much of a difference. And for me, when I push a button like this, like for example, if I were playing with Zangief, okay, or Zangief, however you want to pronounce it, and I want to do a spinning clothesline. When I do it on here, I feel like I did it with authority. I can feel the buttons plunging into the stick, and I can tell that I did it properly. When I did it on a Sanwa, I might be a little bit questioning of myself because it's such a minute amount of force that's needed to push those buttons. I might say, shit, I accidentally pushed one of the buttons earlier than the other two, and that's why my spinning clothesline didn't come up. But on this, I know I pushed all three of those buttons at the same time because they're plungers. They have the same amount of resistance. And really, when you're doing combos and things, you can feel assured that you confirmed your hits by pushing down these plunging buttons. Some people have actually told me they do prefer the Sumitsu buttons, and I can understand that. If you're playing with a character who's a character who relies a lot on having confident combos, on making sure that you're doing hit confirms, and if you accidentally, ooh, I threw out that button by accident, this might be the stick for you, because to be completely honest, the Sanwa buttons, even though they have the better reaction time in my opinion, they can get a little bit touchy. Like, you could be going for a combo, right? Or you could be buffering a move. Let's say you're buffering a super. You have Ryu, and you're buffering a super fireball. You're waiting for your opponent to throw a fireball so you can blow through it with your own super. You could be buffering, and on here, you'll be buffering, and then you're fine. On a Sanwa, you might accidentally be buffering, and oops, it activates. And you're like, what the fuck? I swear to God I didn't push that button. But the Sanwa buttons are that touchy that even if you're kind of like just gently tapping the top, hovering above it, you might accidentally activate it. And that is the downfall of the Sanwa button in my opinion. So I think the Sanwa button, you have to play on it a lot. You have to get a lot of experience on it to make sure you don't get accidental inputs. The Sumitsu will probably be a little bit easier for the beginner because they are they're similar to American buttons, where you definitely need to basically hit the button hard to confirm what you're doing. So there's trade-off, there's pros and cons. Obviously, if you need to push it a little bit harder, you need to make sure that, oh, I'm sure that I pushed the button. Well, maybe you're not going to get as fast of a reaction time as you wanted without significant amount of practicing. So it's all up to your own play style and what you prefer and what you think is the better stick. Now, in my opinion, if you just want me to compare this joystick, this Hori EXSE joystick, to the previous joystick that I reviewed, which was the Mad Catz Tournament Edition SE, well, number one, as you can see, this does not have any artwork. It's a black top. And I did mention that a previous Hori stick for the PlayStation 2 had a metallic top where you can get fingerprints all over it. This isn't as bad, but it is a little bit bad because I can see right now, you might not be able to see it on the camera, but I can see fingerprints down here and up here because it is a shiny type of top. So that is a little bit of a bummer that you can see fingerprints all over the thing. The other thing is, it doesn't have all the adjustments that Hori stick had. I'm sorry, that Mad Catz stick had, excuse me. For example, up here, as you can see, it doesn't have any turbo adjustments or anything like that. It does, in its favor, it does have the microphone jack, okay? But the Xbox 360 joysticks for Mad Catz also have a microphone jack at the bottom. So it's really nothing added. It's just like they moved the microphone jack from the bottom up here and there's no turbos. Now keep in mind, though, that the turbos are not allowed in tournament play anyway. So, if you learn to use them at home, it might be a detriment to you if you ever go to a tournament and then realize you can't use the turbos. So, are the turbos a nice thing to have? Sure. Usually, if you're not playing a Street Fighter game is when you use the turbos anyway. But if you're using this as a competitive stick, it's really not that big of a deal. But the one complaint that I do have about this stick, you're actually going to see it right off the bat because it's pretty funny that this happened. The cord on this joystick is not very long. It's only about maybe, 6 feet, I want to say. As opposed to, I think the cord on the Mad Catz stick is 10 to 12 feet, which is very good and very long. The problem with this stick, number one, you can't store the cord inside like you can with the Mad Catz stick. And number two, because the cord is shorter, thank God for the Xbox 360 having a breakaway cord, because as you can see, what happened to me on this one was I was unplugging it, and the cord was so short, I pulled it by accident, and I yanked it, and the end came off. Now, there's the end that you put on there, and that has a USB cable that you plug into your 360, but I really, really wish that the cords for the Hori sticks, that number one, they were longer, and number two, they had some storage solution, because they really don't. Usually you end up having to get, some kind of a rubber band or something to wrap up the cord. in order to store it, which is a bummer, having a cord that's external to your stick flapping around, when on the flip side you could buy a Hori stick where the cord gets stored inside. It's not as much of a mess. So overall, how do I rate this stick? I think that the Famitsu controls are still perfectly viable controls. I don't think there's anything wrong with them. Like I said, I think it's really a difference between personal preferences. I think each version of Sanwa and Famitsu have pros and cons. So for me, I would have to say this joystick I rated a 3.5, and the only reason it gets a 3.5, a little bit lower than the Mad Catz, is the cord issues. The cord's shorter, and it doesn't have any built-in storage. I think it should have both of those things. So, alright, that is it for this episode of DSP Tries It. This will wrap it up so far for the joystick reviews. I just wanted to get a Sanwa stick and a Famitsu stick out of the way, because a lot of people had questions about the difference between the controls and what I found after playing with them, and now you have that knowledge, so hopefully that'll help you to make your decision if you're going to buy a joystick or maybe order custom parts for your own joystick. I hope to do more DSP Tries It in the future that aren't food, and that's exactly what I've been trying to do, so I hope that you're enjoying the variety. I'm going to keep doing this kind of thing, but not to say that I'm going to stop doing food and drinks and things like that, but I do want to mix it up a little bit, so I'm going to try that in the future. Alright, thanks.